you now.
So we're speaking with Ra-kalam Bob Moses, the great jazz drummer. He has a lot of experience and insight into this music. And so I first wanted to ask you about your insights into Tisziji, who plays guitar but is nonetheless a drummer. And can you explain that for us?
Yeah. Well, I've listened to the very best drummers. I grew up in the building with Max Roach, Art Blakey, Elvin Jones. Got to hear all these great cats, Rashid Ali and Pete LaRocca and on, Edgar Bateman and many, many more. I can't even mention all of them. And I would say unequivocally that the best drummer I ever heard is Tisziji. Even though at this point he's not physically playing the drums, but it comes through in his guitar playing, and I've never played with anyone who has more awareness of drums. I have a sense that John Coltrane had a great awareness of drums. Of course, I never had the honor, to play with him, but I'm sure I would have felt something like that from him, and it's indicated by the drummers that he chose in his group, which, if I'm getting them all right, was Pete LaRocca, Elvin Jones, Roy Haynes, and Rashid Ali. I would put them in the top 4 or 5 drummers of all time. So Coltrane rhythmically was a drummer as well through the saxophone. Tisziji, it's very clear to me, is a great drum spirit. I used to play in a group with Jack DeJohnette, one of the all-time great drummers. So I've had the experience of playing with other great drummers. I did a date with Billy Hart recently with Tisziji. He's one of the greatest drummers. But when I'm playing with Tisziji, I'm playing with a drummer that's way over my head. And of course that, for me, is the best situation, because when you're playing with people way over your head, that's when you get pulled up. And this is what I've always craved. When I was younger, of course, it happened much more often because I was just a kid and I didn't know nothing. And so almost everybody I played with was over my head. But now that I get to an older guy, it's more rare, and oftentimes I'm the wise one, or I'm the one that's teaching or helping, showing kids how to get closer to the stuff, which is fine. I'm happy with that, but I much prefer being in the student role, and I much prefer being the one who's getting my ass kicked, because that's what raises you up. And Tisziji has spoken quite clearly about one of his functions in the world is to help liberate the drummers. And I've seen it in action with Rashid Ali, who played with Tisziji, who you wouldn't think would need much more liberation. Than one of the freest drummers, one of the most innovative drummers, one of the drummers responsible for beginning the process of freeing up the drummers. I would say Rashid Ali, Milford Graves, Sonny Murray. I'm sure I'm missing a few, but there was definitely a bunch of drummers who came and helped take the drum out from strictly time, beat, and maybe even strictly cultural-based music. Tisziji very clearly has expressed that, and I've seen it at work. And the thing that you have to realize very clear is that when Tisziji is speaking about liberation, it's not about music, it's about as a being. And whereas I can't think of anything necessary to improve about Rashid Ali's drumming. As a human being, he had issues like all of us do, hurting, upset, frustrated, angry, and there's plenty in the world that you could be frustrated and angry about, righteously so. But I remember watching him when he would be with Tisziji, with Bapu, and how all that would melt away through the music, but also through the presence, just the peace and the calm and the truth. So liberation is really something that's internal. It doesn't really have to do with music, although it appears in the music. And as far as my own particular journey, and let's say medicine, and one thing about Bapu is that his healing is, when you sit with him one-on-one in satsang, it's very specific. It's like a surgery, you get what you need. When you play for an audience, it's maybe a little more general. It's a general healing, although sometimes it might be focused towards a particular individual, as he talks about. In my case, it was very clear. He made it very clear, and now it's so obvious to me, but I didn't see it in the beginning, that in order for me to progress as a human, spiritually, musically, I had to get beyond my attachment to all forms of African music, black music, Latin music, Brazilian music, all these great, rich, beautiful culture music that I was certainly enthralled to, and with good reason, that old black magic's got me in this stuff, it's great stuff. And certainly for young white peeps, it's probably good that they get into something like that. If they're going to be any kind of rhythmic person, they have to deal with these forms and these styles and such. But in the end, I know that if I remain stuck in that, I would never reach any kind of true happiness, joy, liberation, creativity, originality, never reach really what my purpose in the world is. Because we don't really need anybody else to do what Elvin did. It's done. Art Blakey did. It's done. We don't need anybody to do what Mongo Santamaria did. You're not going to improve upon it. It's done. It's great. There's people who are still doing it who are great, and that's their path, With me, even from the beginning, it was never about jazz or any particular style of music. What caught me about music was the soul, the cry. And you find it in all kinds of music. You find it in hillbilly music. You find it in Appalachian music. You find it in Arabic music. You find it in the Jewish people singing from the Torah. And you find it in the blues and in the church and in Bulgarian music and flamenco music. Those guys are singing. It's like, oh, boom, goes right to the heart. So this has always been Willie Nelson, Ray Charles. It doesn't matter what style. You can recognize this kind of soulful heart tug in the music. It's always been what was important to me. But I realize now that the way that I play, the way that I really play, I would get fired from any one of those bands, anyone I just mentioned. And they don't really need me because they have people in their culture who devoted their whole life to that, and I'm not going to improve upon it. They don't need me for that. So of all the people that I've met, heard, played with on any instrument, Tisziji is really the only situation that has that soul, that cry, that, whatever you want to call it, spirit, that's completely open for the drums. I can play what I play. I'm not boxed in. There's no limitations. I'm not weighted down by history, by the past. It can be totally in the present. And for someone like me, who really is a creator, that's the ideal situation, to have that kind of soulfulness along with the freedom. And I can't really think of any other situation that really offers that. Of course, when I'm playing with people in the culture of music, I do my best to not mess up their music. But I can't really be myself. And that's okay, it's a job, man. And I learned something and I get something from all those gigs. I'm very grateful for all those gigs, but, well, they're not all, but the few that I get, I'm very grateful. But still, I know that, like I say, if I'm truly being who I am and how I play, there's only one place where I can be that, 100%, and be elevated and be, lifted. And when you play that way too, the music is really mysterious because you can't relate it to anything in the past. There's no reference points except heart, spirit, which is the which is the basis of all music and all culture. That remains. That the center of it is the same for all music. But in terms of the actual music, it's like, whoa, what is that? Well, I never heard that before, and you'll never hear it again. That's the beauty of it. There's no patterns. There's no licks. It's the most in-present, and I would say too, it might be something that Tisziji already said, but it's become so internalized that I feel it's like my thought at this point, or my reality too, is what heals me is to play what I don't know. Most humans, most musicians, what makes them feel good is to play what they know. most audience to hear what they know. For me, what heals me is to play what I don't know and what can't be known with any kind of a rational, usual human mind, beyond that kind of mental process. You have to let go of those mental processes in order to be in tune with Tisziji, which is no easy task. To play appropriately, you have to let go of all these previous mechanical patterns, karmic patterns, gravities. Yeah. It's a beautiful process. It's the best.
So you're talking about really in Tisziji liberating you musically. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, he's been working me, for quite a while. I've known him for that's close to 40 years now, and I've come a long way in the music and in life because it's the same. It can't just be in the music. If it's in the music, it's not real. It's a facade. Many people talk about freedom and liberation, but you see how they live, and it's not really true. No, it has to be something that's internal, and then if it's becomes a truth of your life, it's going to reflect in your music. But I've gotten all kinds of really good burn, counsel, support, and of course, and I asked for it. And that's also crucial too, because I was very slow to ask for it and very reluctant to ask for it, and very resistant to any kind of spiritual practice. I recognized from the beginning that there was a quality, a mastery, and a feeling of healing in the music that I got from nowhere else. But whether I was willing to, or open enough, ready to let myself go and sacrifice what I needed to sacrifice and begin to practice to start making this progress, it took a long time, and Tisziji was infinitely patient with me. And then once I started asking for, hey, help me, I need some help, big time. Then he started, bringing out the machete pretty good, and boom, bang, ching, boom, sap, bang, and gotten a lot of great advice in terms of both musical advice and life advice to get to this point where I hope that most of what I play is really in the moment, and not based on the past. And I do notice when I hear it back, the new stuff, I'm actually liking it a little bit. I've always been very super self-critical, but I'm starting to really dig what I'm doing. And I notice that it has the feeling that I get from good music, great music. You hear swing, it's swinging, it feels good. You hear folkloric music, it has a certain, sweetness to it. It rolls, it's starting to have that quality without being any of those music. And there's not too many people that play that way. And I'm happy to be on that journey, that's all I can say. And it was very necessary for me to let go of attachments to these cultures and forms and such over time.
Do you find that the young musicians, in particular your students, do they have difficulty grasping the idea of Tisziji, or let's say John Coltrane, as a drummer, hearing the guitar and translating that into a drum concept?
Well, yeah, sure they do, because the truth of it is most of the new students are not drum aware at all, which is ironic because they claim to love jazz. But that's one thing you could always say about jazz, was it's very drum oriented music. Of course, not only jazz, R&B and Brazilian music and African music and all these forms and Afro-Rican and Afro-Cuban and all this stuff. Very drum oriented. And I find that the newer crop of musicians are much less drum aware. And they're really learning the music more from the harmony, I think, more from the notes. And the rhythm is the key. And many of them have almost a very negative projection about themselves, which I hope I can, maybe encourage them to get beyond. Some people, I say, I have no rhythm, I have no time, I'm spazzed out, I can't. I say, wow, I said, why would you say that about yourself? You're only 20 years old. You can't do anything yet. It's not over. It's just the beginning. And I take my sometimes I take my funky drumsticks that I hand make, like old school back in the day, and from the store, and I take them and I do like the Queen, the knighthood, and I say, I, Ra-kalam, who grew up in the same building with Max Roach, Art Blakey, hereby anoint you. You are, please, from this moment on, think of yourself as a drummer, as a rhythm person, as a dancer, as a rhythm being from this day forth. Think of yourself that way and be that, because if you're going to be any kind of musician, you really need to get down with drums. And this is an obvious truism of music, is that all the great saxophone players, all the great singers, all the great guitar players are great drummers, whether they touch a drum or not, because it's timing. Drumming is timing, and a singer, a melody is all about timing, where you place that note. So it behooves all the musicians to get down with the drums, which was also Tisziji advice, because I asked him from time to time, what should I be showing these kids? He said, get them all playing the drums. That was one thing. And so that's very crucial. The drummers, of course, need to get down with melodic material. And the melodic peeps need to get down with the drums and rhythm, because melodic people with no rhythm make for lousy music, and drummers without any melodic sense make for lousy music. It's clear.
Can you comment on the drums in terms of their social and cultural purpose, and also on their further, let's say, more esoteric and spiritual related purposes?
That's a great question. Well, drums serve so many functions for people. It's a party, it's for dancing, it's for releasement, it's a joy. There's a great joy in drumming. It's a very functional instrument. It's a supportive instrument. It's an enabling instrument. Like I said, all the great singers, so on, but they need a great drummer behind them to give a cushion, some kind of rhythmic cushion. And I think all the culture of drumming are very important. And particularly when you're a beginner, it's very good to get comfortable with various culture music style of music. It's interesting because these days I don't listen to music at all. But when I was younger, I listened to all kind of music, which is also different from most of the students that I get. They only listen to jazz, and they listen to one period of jazz. But I listen to reggae music, and Bulgarian music, and Indian music, and Pakistani music, every kind of music, country music, rock and roll, funk, and listen to the drummers. So I do think that this is it's very important to become, if you're going to be a musician, to get down with certain basic culture music. You got your 2/3, your 3/2, you got your 6/8, you got your swing, you got your samba. You got your funk, you got your march, your funky march, you got your jazz, your swing. Very useful, but not necessarily an end point, a good beginning point. And I think the second part of your question is, can drumming go beyond that? Yes, it can. And for some of us, it has to. For some people, the culture is enough. They spend their whole life learning how to play a particular culture groove, and they become masterful at it, make people happy doing it, live a nice, comfortable, hopefully comfortable life doing it, tour all over, make people happy. It's a good life. But it could be for certain people. But for me, no, it has to be more than that. It has to go, like I say, kind of beyond the culture. And rhythm is so infinite. And when I think about how self-limitation among musicians, considering how supposedly creative musicians are, and how they still can't think of any other rhythm beside the boom, bop, bop, boom, bop, that's it, or ding, ding, that's all you got. Rhythm is absolutely infinite. And I have no problem making a brand new rhythm every single time. It's natural. It's like breathing. It's like walking. It's like farting. It's no big deal. But yet, very few people do that. And I won't mention any name, but there's a guy that I know is quite a great, I like to say, Latin jazz pianist. And I don't see him that often. He's a good friend. I played with him, and I respect him highly. And I was passing him in the hallway, and I knew, well, we're going to have probably about 30-second interaction. And how do I want to spend the 30 seconds? I could say, hey, man, how's the wife? How's the kids and the baby? But I said, no, I don't really want to do that. So I said, hey, man, how about, so I just walk up and say, hey, man, how about shkarabunka laka antikara bading kukata untipara untupublang ada untupara untupublang tukublang tukupata umpikata unkukuku. Right away, this guy said, just put it in the box, and I thought, great to see you, man. Love you, I'm good. I'm thinking, man, he couldn't get out of that stuff for 30 seconds to do a little new music right on the spot with your old buddy, Ra-kalam, your old friend. And that's so I do observe that, you know, the culture of music can be a box, can be a prison. And the problem is not in the music itself, but if it owns you. Yeah, you know, you don't want to be owned by it. You want to be able to be, you know, your own creator. Yeah, I would say, yes. Is that good? Is enough? Too much?